Hello and welcome everyone to the weekly webinar where QuickSight community members learn about product functionalities, new feature launches, and best practices with community experts and solution architects from AWS. My name is Deepak Singh. I'm a QuickSight Solutions Architect at AWS, and today we will focus learning more about what is SPICE and what are some of the best practices when we want to use SPICE datasets. Along with me today, I have my colleague Anwar Ali. He will be moderating the sessions. So please type your questions, post your questions on community during the sessions, and Anwar will help you answer those questions. Also, Christine Mandia, who's QuickSight Community Manager. Christine, I'll pass over to you to talk about today's post-session activities.
Wonderful. Just want to take you on this little demo here showing you we have a resource toolbar that includes Demo Central. We've got the developer portal. We have documentation. One of the most useful aspects of the community is this searchable Q&A that you'll find. This is a place where you can ask questions. You can share your knowledge and show your expertise. That's how a lot of our experts have become community experts. It's just generally a place to help one another, to help peers. And often you'll find if you already have a question, it may already have been answered. We have quite a big database there of knowledge that's been collected. We also have a learning center. In that section, we have getting started resources. You can upskill with how-to videos, webinars, articles, and all sorts of resources. So encourage you to check that out. And then we also have a what's new in blog section. And that's where you'll get the latest and greatest info on, new feature launches, and what's exciting and coming. And then we have the events section, and that's where you can sign up for weekly, monthly, on-person, inline, hybrid events. Everything is there, really focused on learning content. So encourage you to check that out. And then obviously we have features at the top where you can see what's, the biggest highlighted events and announcements at the moment. So we encourage you to check that out. Okay, next slide. Okay, and you can sign up for the community, so we encourage you to do that. It's free, and you can do that through scanning this QR code. I'm also going to put a link into the chat right here. And I wanted to let you know about a few ongoing weekly and monthly resources we have in the community. So we have the weekly online learning series, which you're at today. That takes place every Wednesday at 10 a.m. Pacific time and Thursday 10 a.m. in Central European time. And then we have a bunch of monthly learning events. Almost every week of the month, you have at least 1 to 2 regular learning options that you can lean into. So the first Friday of the month, we have new features that is run by our PartnerCast, AWS PartnerCast. You'll meet Sonic today, and he's spearheading that. The second and third Wednesdays, we've got immersion days in the Americas. Those are really deep dives on topics like authoring, Q, admin, embedding. Third Wednesdays, we have immersion days in Europe on authoring. And fourth Thursdays, we have a live Q&A where you can just bring your Ask Anything question to one of our solution architect experts and get your questions answered. Okay, so again, encourage you to scan that and join the community. It's free, and it's also a great place to network and meet others, like many of the people on this meeting today. Next slide. Okay, and I'm going to toss it back over to you, Deepak.
Yeah, thanks, Christine. Excellent overview. Please take a moment to join after SPICE session to be part of our pilot user online community. If you haven't already signed up for the community, please do sign up for the community using the links here, QR code, It helps. Once you're a member, you can benefit from all the features that was just outlined by Christine. You can, today's tag we are using to ask questions is QLS -spice. So please use this tag to ask questions. And let me show you how do you go about asking questions. So I'm going to share my screen here. On the community page, once you log in, community.amazonquicksite.com. Once you're on community page, you can go to categories, questions and answers, right? When you click on questions and answers, you come to this Q&A homepage. And to the right section, you have options. You not only have lists of questions that have been asked and currently being answered by community members, but also you can ask new questions. So when you click on new questions, you get this little dialog box window. You can type your title, question of the day, question about spice, any title, any questions that you want. And then you can select the tag. And today's tag was QLS spice, right? So you'll select this tag. So I encourage you to go on to community and ask any questions during the session using this tag, and then we will be responding to those questions as we progress through the session. Okay, so I will hop out of that window and go back to the PowerPoint slides. So that is the way to ask questions. Please take a note of hashtag QLSspice when you are asking questions in community. Recording, yes, we are recording this session like all weekly sessions we do for webinars. The recording videos will be posted and available to QuickSight community websites as well as QuickSight YouTube channel towards the end of the week. Okay, so let's get to the agenda for today's. Our focus is spice data, how to refresh spice data, security aspects of it, and what are some of the best practices. So we want you to learn almost everything that's spice, right? So let's get going. Spice, right? So in QuickSight, there are two ways to access your data, right? Either you can have a direct query to your underlying data sources, databases, or you can ingest that data into Spice, which is super fast parallel in-memory calculation engine, right? Spice provides you consistently fast performance, no matter how many concurrent users you have. So you can scale concurrency of users from 10 to 100 to 100 of thousands. Spice will scale up and down to meet your requirements. It is serverless, so you do not need to provision any infrastructure, any hardware, or you do not need to manage and maintain any of those infrastructure needs. And you can globally deploy it to hundreds of thousands of users as well, based on your user concurrency and consumptions, right? So we recommend you to use Spice to get the better performance experience for your end users when they are interactively using the dashboards, collecting insights and to make actionable decisions, right? Spice has a capacity limit. One data set could be up to 1 billion rows or 1 terabyte. So that's a lot of data you can fit into a single data set on Spice. Spice saves you time and money, right? So you can run your analytical queries fast. You do not need to wait for your direct queries to be processed by your data set because those queries are processed and answered using Spice that's in-memory data store. And then data stored in Spice can be used multiple times. So if you are incurring cost on your database sources, for each query you execute, each query scan that you run, In that case, Spice will save you cost as well, because all the dashboard queries will run against the Spice dataset. And Spice capacity is shared by all users in a single AWS region, right? So Spice offers you lots of benefits to save you cost and money both, right? And time, effort. So let's look at the next section. Once you ingest data into Spice, what do? You want to be able to refresh that data, right? Because you're ingesting it from your database to Spice, which is in memory data store. You can refresh Spice data sets either full or incremental both. When you do full, it refreshes the entire data set. When you do incremental, you have options to refresh data set starting at 15 minutes interval. So you could do 15 minutes refresh, 30 minutes refresh, say hourly refresh, or every, daily refresh, weekly refresh. So your different options to refresh data. And we'll look at here how you can add refresh schedule either for full or incremental data refresh. And you can schedule your data refreshes both using UI and API. Recently, we released API to schedule data refreshes for Spice using APIs. And if your use case is to refresh Spice data not based on a schedule, but based on an event, if you want to trigger, you do have options to use another API called Create Ingestion API. That API will allow you to refresh data if you want to trigger, say, based on a cron job or based on another event in your application, right? So you can refresh your data with full refresh as well as incremental refresh, and different options to refresh either using UI schedule or API scheduling or event-driven scheduling. Spice security. So Spice data stored in Spice is encrypted at rest, right? Using AWS managed keys by default. Data that's in transit in Amazon QuickSight is encrypted as well. And Spice also offers you options to bring your customer managed KMS keys to encrypt the data at rest in Spice. So no matter what, you have options to do different type of to secure your data and encrypt it so that others don't have access to you, and you have secure data to be used. Authorizations, a data set can be accessed only by users or group of users that have been authorized to use, right? So not everyone can access your data set. Oftentimes we get to ask questions, hey, can I use Spice or can I use direct query? And when you have two options, we choose to sort of do a versus question, right? Spice versus direct query. What I think best option is you want to focus on your use case and needs of your use case. And you can, in fact, use a combination of both Spice plus direct query to meet those use cases. So, and you also can use multiple data sets in a single analysis on a single sheet to create visuals, right? So based on your use case and based on your requirements, it's sort of you can use both of them together and not necessarily one versus other. But here I wanted to highlight some of the key things that you need to be aware when using Spice or when using direct query, right? So think about Spice. When you're using Spice, your data is ingested and available in Spice. All the queries, dashboard visual queries that are executed, those are executed against a Spice data, which is stored in memory, right? Which also have your calculations stored as well, right? So it gives you faster performance there. Because data is stored in memory, there are some calculations that are stored, pre-calculated, and results are stored, right? So You do not need to require a performance tuning effort as such because Spice takes care of you behind the scene. In direct query case, your visuals, a dashboard visual query will be prepared and sent out to your underlying database, data source, right? And your data set need to execute those queries, prepare the result sets, and send it to Spice. And then Spice only renders the data for you, right? So essentially, you have sort of responsibility to fine tune those queries and have an ongoing effort to manage the performance of those queries as such, right? Spice capacity is shared by all users in a single AWS region. So if you have a use case of QuickSight where you need to have QuickSight available in multiple AWS regions, you want to purchase additional capacity in region that's not your default region. QuickSight also supports cross data source joins. So in case you have a data source available, say in Redshift, and another data is available in S3 or even say MS SQL Server, and if you want to join data sets from these heterogeneous data sources, you can bring them into Spice, join them, and visualize and create visual insights using that data set. Right. Whereas in case of direct query, your query always goes to specific data sets that you have defined behind the scenes to access that query. Some considerations when you're doing Spice, direct query, or combination. As I mentioned, Spice, each data set can have 1 billion rows or 1 terabyte in size. That's a lot of data. But that is the capacity limit. So, and you can create any number of data sets you like up to, subjected to Spice capacity, right? If you have more than 1 billion rows in your data set, then you want to say leverage the data architecture principles and think about data aggregations, materialized view, those kind of concepts to reduce the size of data set and then load into Spice. And with Spice dataset, the minimum latency, refresh latency is 15 minutes. So if your use case requirement is you want below 15 minutes data latency or data refresh, then you want to consider, say, data direct query as one of the options. For direct query, some of the considerations here are, higher user concurrency. So if your users increase from 100 users to 100,000 users, all the queries generated by these 100,000 users will be sent back to your database. So the load on your underlying database will be impacted. So if that database is for use multi-purpose, not only support QuickSight BI needs, but also for other purposes, then it may struggle to meet the demands and needs. So something to consider when you're doing the direct query is the load on your underlying database or data sources with higher user concurrency consumption patterns, right? And also, since all these queries are sent back to your database, so you need to look at ongoing performance tuning effort on your database, right? What are the performance tuning parameters? What are the different queries being hit? Creating indexes, enabling these efforts such that queries render the results in a faster performant manner to be visualized on QuickSight dashboard. Right? So keep those considerations in mind, but you don't want to be thinking Spice versus direct query. I always say use them based on the use case needs, and even you can combine them to be used on a single sheet in an analysis. Okay. So some of the best practices I want to call out to be used for Spice, right? Oftentimes you may see, hey, Spice seems to be the best or offer me the best option. When should I use Spice versus when should I go for direct query? General recommendation is unless your use case requires you to have, say, near real-time data freshness, right? Say 1 minute, 5 minutes, 7 minutes. In that case, you have to use direct query because you can refresh Spice data sets less than 15 minutes. So that's when you want to consider direct query. Or if for whatever reason your data set is exceeding a single data set size limit of 1 billion rows or 1 terabyte size, right? Depending on whichever one is reached first. And when that happens, then you want to consider the data architecture principles of aggregating data, creating materialized views, right, to reduce the size of your data sets. But other than those, we recommend you most of the use cases Spice. Why? Because it offers you higher concurrency, it saves you cost and time, and it gives you higher performance experience, better experience for your end users. Now, when you create data sets, right, it's important to understand that we are creating purpose-built data sets. What does that mean? When we create purpose, sometimes what happens is, as a developer, we want to connect to the data and start building things without thinking about what is the purpose of the dashboard, what use cases the dashboard needs to meet, and what is the data requirement to support those use cases. We want to take working backward approach where you want to think about the purpose of dashboard, the value, the questions dashboard needs to answer, the insights it needs to provide, and what data is needed to make that happen. And in that scenario, once you determine what data is needed, we say, if your tables have 100 columns or you joined a set of 5 to 10 tables and it results into 100, 200 columns, if you don't need all those columns, you can exclude those columns from your data set. So you want to make sure that you're pruning your data sets and starting with the minimal that's needed to meet your dashboarding insights requirement. Or another thing is sometimes your tables have, say, 5 years worth of data, but your dashboard needs only 2 years worth of data to serve its purpose. Then you want to make sure that when you're creating the data set, you are limiting the number of rows to 2 years only and not allowing all the 5 years used as part of your data set. So think about those, right? Creating a purpose-built data sets by pruning that data sets aligned to your dashboarding requirements, right? Spice is not only an in-memory data store, it's also a calculation engine. So try to push your row level calculations, try to move your string calculations in your data set so that those calculations are performed and the results are stored. And when queries are executed, it is accessing the directly stored results without requiring to perform those calculations in runtime. So those are some of the best practices. Let's do a quick look into Spice as how do we create a Spice data set and how do we refresh it. So I already am logged into my QuickSight accounts. I have a dataset portion page. I want to create a new dataset. I'll click on dataset and say I have a data source that I want to use to create a new dataset. And I will go ahead and use this data source to create a new dataset, right? And I'll select my schema and the table I want to use. And once I select, right, you have options here, import to Spice or direct query. To create Spice dataset, you want to make sure that you enable import to Spice, right? And then I'll click on edit and preview. And you can change the name of your dataset to say demo or something else, right? And then save and publish. Once you do that, your dataset is available for you to schedule the refreshes. So I'm going to use one of the data sets that I already have, and I wanted to show you how to go about creating the refresh schedule. So once you click on a data set, you you have these menu options where you can get summary of data set, refresh, permissions, and usage. You click or select refresh options, right? And you can see right now I do not have any schedule. So let's just go ahead, create a couple of schedules here. So you have options to do both full refresh as well as incremental refresh schedules. Let's create the full refresh schedule first. And you can choose a time, and I can say maybe 1 a.m., right? And I can change the AM to PM slot, and then I want to do, say, full refresh daily, right? And I click, and you can see it created a full refresh schedule. I can add incremental refresh schedule, same options. And since my full refresh starts on 20th, I'm going to go do ahead and change the timing to say 10 a.m. Right? So with the incremental refresh, you need to provide one more thing called configure incremental refresh option. It is looking for a date column to identify the latest change on data, right? So we need the look back date column. In this case, I have order date as a date. I want to create a window, and I want to do it, say, at hourly level, right? And then I'll click continue. And then it has created incremental refresh schedule as well, right? So you have options to create these schedules using UI. But what if you wanted to, say, refresh the data using event-based, right? If you have an event, you want to trigger the refresh, what do you do? So you could use create ingestion APIs as well to make that happen. So let me just quickly bring that up here as an option. Okay, looks like my session expired. Give me 1 second. Let me refresh the session here. So while we wait for, I'm going to go ahead, refresh my session, and you can use your tool of choice, right? When you want to run CLI commands, I'll be use CLI. I'm going to use Cloud9 here, but you can use any other tools of your choice or API SDKs as well, right? So when it's coming up, it's loading here. Okay. So like I said, right, you can run create ingestion API or CLI to refresh the data. In this case, I want to run a create ingestion with my account ID with a specific data set that I created. And I am changing the ingestion type, right? So you can do both full refresh or incremental. So let me just do the full refresh. And then make sure that if you have run it before, you want to change the ID for the incremental or full refresh, right? For that API to refresh. So I'm going to go ahead, enter. So it's already initialized the request 201. Let's go back and see if my data set has been refreshed as well. Let me just get a new session for QuickSight. Okay, so I'll go back to the data set that I had created, and then I will go back to refresh schedule for that data set. Let me just go back here. Refresh. Let me see. So for some reason, give me 1 second. Let me see, where did we create? Okay. Okay. So as you can see, it did the full refresh just now when we talked about, and based on the 201 schedule that we have done here, right? So it will refresh the data over here as we continue to refresh completed, and it loaded the rows here. Okay, so with that, let me just get back. So with that, what we had a quick overview of, what is SPICE, what are some of the best practices to SPICE, what are the use cases when you want to use SPICE, right? Also, here are some of the references we have. You could look at these references to help that are SPICE related. We also have a blog that can help you with the event-driven refresh of SPICE data sets, in addition to access to additional resources on QuickSight community. All right, with that, let me hand it over to these are upcoming webinar sessions that we have. We have one on Wednesday, April 26th for configuring QuickSight resource permissions, and then other events that are coming next week, right? On April 27th for Q&A as well.